The scent of lilies hung in the air like a lie too sweet to trust. Anna stood at the front of the small funeral hall, her black suit perfectly pressed, her voice steady as she spoke of love, devotion, and the man she had shared half her life with. Her eyes flicked to the casket, a polished mahogany box that now held nothing but silence and secrets. "My husband Maxim was a man of integrity," she said. "He loved his family, and the voice cut through the room like a blade. We loved him too." Anna froze. Heads turned. At the back of the room stood a woman, blonde, elegant, with a boy, no more than 5, clutching her side. The boy held a small stuffed dog, its fur matted and worn. His eyes, wide and solemn, were the same shade of dark hazel as the man in the casket. The woman stepped forward. "My name's Victoria. Maxim was my husband, too." A gasp, not loud, but sharp enough to ripple through the mourners like a sudden gust of wind. Anna turned slowly. Her eyes searched the familiar faces. Her mother-in-law sat stiffly in the second row, eyes lowered, hands clenched in her lap. "You knew?" Anna's voice barely rose above a whisper, but it carried. The older woman didn't answer. She didn't have to. It wasn't the betrayal that stunned Anna most. It was the casualness of it. The way truth stepped into the room, not with a bang, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew she belonged. Then, movement. From beside her, Elia reached into the pocket of his black coat and pulled something out. A small flash drive. His hand trembled slightly as he extended it. "Dad wanted us to see this," he murmured, barely audible. His voice was thick, like he hadn't spoken all day. Anna took the flash drive, her fingers cold. The metal burned against her palm like a brand. And then stillness. No one moved. No one breathed. She felt the weight of everyone's eyes on her, but her focus had narrowed to one thing: the woman who stood across the room with Maxim's child. A child who, by blood, shared a part of Ilya. Anna felt the ground shift beneath her. The story she thought she'd lived was splintering, fragmenting into truths she hadn't asked for. The ceremony ended in uncomfortable silence. Whispers filled the air like smoke. Outside, snow began to fall, and inside her chest something cracked. The house felt foreign when Anna returned. It was the same place she'd lived for over a decade. Soft lighting, clean surfaces, photographs lining the hallway. But now everything looked different, colder. The silence, once comforting, had turned cavernous. She locked the door behind her and leaned against it, holding the flash drive like it might vanish if she let go. Leah walked past her without a word. He didn't go to his room. He went to the garage. That's where he went when he needed air but didn't want to be seen. A trait he'd inherited from his father, she realized, with a bitter twist of irony. Anna sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where Maxim once read the morning news aloud just to make her laugh. That man, the one who brushed crumbs off her cheek and whispered apologies when they fought, had been a stranger all along. She plugged the flash drive into her laptop. It contained a single folder labeled "To Anna and Ilya." Her breath caught. She hesitated for a full minute before clicking. There were 3 video files, one for her, one for Ilya, and one unnamed. Anna played hers first. Maxim's face filled the screen. He looked tired, older than she remembered him, even in his final weeks. He was seated somewhere unfamiliar. White walls, no windows, a single lamp casting long shadows behind him. His hands were clasped tightly in front of him. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and you hate me. I understand," and his stomach tightened. "I've lied. Not once, not casually. No. I've lied every day. For years. And the worst part, I almost told you so many times, but I didn't. I kept thinking I could fix it without breaking you. That's what I feared most, breaking you." Her eyes burned. "There's a boy, Lev. He's mine. I met Vitor after that fight we had in Sochi, the one you never brought up again. I thought it was nothing. I thought I was lost. Then it became more. Too much. And still I couldn't leave you. You were the mother of my child, my home. But so was she." Anna hit pause. She couldn't breathe. She stared at the screen, her own reflection faint over the frozen image of Maxim's face. Then she stood and walked to the hallway. The framed photo of their wedding still hung there. She in white, he in tailored navy, beaming like a man with nothing to hide. She reached for it, touched the corner, and then yanked it from the wall. The glass cracked as it hit the floor. She didn't apologize. In the garage, Ilya was sitting on an old workbench, arms crossed, staring at the cement. He didn't look up when she stepped inside. "Did you watch yours?" Anna asked softly. "No!" A pause. "But I saw the one without a name." She blinked. "What was it?" He finally looked at her. "A recording, him and Victoria talking, arguing about whether to tell us." She stepped closer. "He said he'd do it, right? After his next business trip? But he didn't come back, did he?" Ilya's voice cracked. Anna swallowed. "No, he didn't." There was something else in the boy's eyes now. Not just sadness, but something sharper. Disillusionment. "I always thought he was perfect," Ilya whispered. Anna sat beside him. "So did I." They didn't speak for a long time. Then Ilya reached under the bench and pulled out a small box. Inside was a collection of keys, receipts, and an envelope with Victoria's name scribbled in Maxim's handwriting. Anna held it like it might bite her. Truth, it seemed, came not in waves, but in pieces. The apartment door opened before Anna had a chance to knock twice. Victoria stood in the frame, calm, composed, even graceful. She wore jeans, a soft cream sweater, and no makeup. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid that fell over one shoulder. The contrast to Anna's structured elegance was striking. "You came," Victoria said simply, stepping aside. Anna hesitated a second longer before entering. The apartment smelled of cinnamon and warm laundry. Toys were scattered across the living room floor. A plastic train, a plush dinosaur, a coloring book with orange scribbles spilling past the lines. It was a lived-in space. A space with life, not grief. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Anna didn't remove her coat. She kept her handbag clutched tight in her lap as if it could shield her from the intimacy of this place. "You have his eyes," Anna said at last, glancing toward the closed door of the boy's room. Victoria followed her gaze, then looked down. "Yes, he does." There was a silence between them, not hostile, just dense with things unsaid. "I'm not here to fight," Anna said. "I'm not even sure why I came," Victoria nodded. "Then let's start with coffee, because I think we both need something warm." She stood and began making 2 cups. Her movements were practiced, unhurried. Anna studied her. This woman who had lived a parallel life, a hidden reality, built on the same man. "I didn't steal him from you," Victoria said over the hiss of the kettle. "That's not why I'm here." Anna's voice was flat. "No? Then what were you? A mistake at first?" Victoria placed the cups on the table and sat again. "And then a secret. Then a habit. Then, finally, a truth he couldn't outrun." Anna sipped the coffee. It was too sweet. "Did he ever talk about us?" she asked. "All the time." Victoria gave a faint smile. "He spoke of you with guilt, but not contempt. He loved you, I think. I hated that sometimes." Anna flinched. "I don't want your sympathy. I'm not offering it." Anna set her cup down with a soft click. "Why did you stay? If you knew he was living a lie, why continue it?" Victoria's eyes glistened, but she didn't blink. "Because I believed in the version he gave me. We met by accident. It started with drinks, nothing more. But then he stayed again and again. And then came Lev. After that, I told myself he would choose. And he never did." "No," Victoria shook her head. "He made promises. Hundreds. He said the same things to both of us, didn't he? That we were the love of his life. That he would fix it. That it was only a matter of time." Anna looked away. It was like watching her own memories fall from someone else's mouth. "He bought us the same watch," she said. "With the same inscription." Victoria's mouth twitched into the last heartbeat. Anna nodded. They both laughed. Quiet, hollow laughter. "He was clever," Victoria said, "but sloppy in the end." Anna reached into her handbag and pulled out the envelope Ilya had found. Victoria froze. "I haven't opened it yet," Anna said. "It has your name on it." Carefully, she slid the letter across the table. Victoria stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Her hands trembled. The letter was brief. "Vika, if you're reading this, I failed again. I wanted to fix everything I thought I could, but I ran out of time. I'm sorry for the nights I left without explanation, the birthdays I missed, the names I forgot to mention. You and Lev deserve better. Tell him I loved him. I really did. Tell him I wanted to be a better man." Victoria folded the letter back with deliberate care. "He wrote something similar to us," Anna said, her voice a thread. "Only he didn't sign it with love." "I don't think he knew how to finish things," Victoria whispered. "He just They sat for a while in silence, both women staring into the same fog of betrayal from opposite ends. I hated you, you know, Anna said finally. I imagined you as some seductress, some manipulator, and I imagined you as cold, controlling, distant. Victoria met her eyes. He made us into stories, so he didn't have to face reality. They were quiet again. Then Victoria said, "You want to meet Lev?" Anna opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't know. She wasn't ready. "I don't want him to be the next casualty in all this," she said instead. "Neither do I." Anna stood to leave. At the door, Victoria said softly, "For what it's worth, I think you were his real home." Anna paused. "No, he just had two houses and ran out of keys." Outside, the air bit at her skin, but it felt cleaner somehow. For the first time since the funeral, she didn't feel like she was drowning, just learning how to breathe through the wreckage. The garage had always been Maxim's domain. Anna rarely stepped inside. It smelled of motor oil and cedar wood, a strange but familiar scent. Maxim used to call it his thinking space, filled with half-finished projects, old vinyls, and the broken bicycle he never repaired. For years, she had dismissed the clutter as harmless nostalgia. Now, it felt like a graveyard of half-truth. Ilya was already there when she entered. He was sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, surrounded by boxes and a tangle of wires. The light bulb above flickered like it, too, couldn't decide how much it wanted to reveal. "I found a key," Ilya said without turning. "Inside the lining of his winter coat, the one you almost threw out." Anna knelt beside him, her knees ached. "To what?" He held up a small lockbox, paint-chipped, edges worn. The kind you might hide in the back of a closet and forget. Together, they opened it. Inside were documents, deeds, bank transfers, letters addressed to names Anna didn't recognize, a second apartment registered under a different surname, photos, and finally, tucked into an old manila folder, a notebook with a leather cover. Familiar. Her diary. No, a copy of it. Anna felt her breath catch. She flipped through the pages. Her own words transcribed in his handwriting. Each moment of happiness she had written in secret over the years, he had copied them. Page by page, date by date, even the ones she had long forgotten. "Why would he do this?" she whispered. Ilya shrugged, but his expression was heavy with confusion. Maybe he wanted to remember. Or make himself believe it mattered more than it did. Anna held the notebook close for a moment, then set it aside. Her fingers brushed against a photograph. Maxim stood between two children, Ilya, around 10, and a boy no older than 6. The resemblance was uncanny. They were standing by a lake, a picnic blanket in the background. Victoria was behind the camera. Anna could tell by the way the angle lingered on Maxim's hand, resting gently on the younger boy's shoulder. Ilya stared at the photo, expression unreadable. "I thought I was enough," he said finally. "I tried to be." Anna looked at her son, not the boy who still left his dishes in the sink or listened to music too loud, but the young man he was becoming. The one who'd been forced to carry too much too soon. "You are," she said. "You always were." He nodded but didn't answer. She knew it would take time for that truth to reach his bones. Anna picked up another envelope. The handwriting was unmistakable, Maxim's, but this one was addressed only with her name. No video, no flash drive, just ink and paper folded with meticulous care. She opened it. "Anna, if this letter finds you, then everything I feared has already happened. There's no explanation that can cleanse what I've done. I betrayed you. I betrayed him, both of them. I was weak, not in love. There was love, but in choices. I lived 2 lives because I was afraid of what would happen if I chose only one. You were the beginning of everything for me. I want you to know that. You gave me a life, a family, a home. I never stopped loving you, but I failed to protect that love from myself. Please, don't let my lies harden your heart. Not toward Ilya, not toward Lev, not toward her. None of you deserved this. And yet, all of you loved me, even when I didn't deserve it. There's a savings account. I meant it for Lev, but if you read this, I want you to use it how you see fit. Maybe for Ilya, maybe for peace. Forgive me, if you can. If you can. I understand, Maxim." Anna read the letter twice. It once more. She folded it slowly and placed it back in the envelope. Her eyes were dry, but inside, something loosened. Not forgiveness. Not yet. but a crack in the grief, wide enough for air to seep in. He left it all to chance, she murmured, to us to figure it out. Ilya stood and brushed dust from his jeans. Then let's stop waiting for him to make sense of it. She looked up at her son. What do you mean? I want to meet him, he said. She hesitated. Lev? He nodded. I want to know who he is, if he's anything like Dad or nothing like him. Anna stood too. All right, she said. For a moment, they just stood there, surrounded by boxes and dust and the remains of a man they thought they knew. Anna looked around one last time, and then they stepped out into the light. The day of the memorial was overcast, but not cold. Anna chose not to wear black. Instead, she dressed in a muted gray dress with a soft blue scarf the color Maxim once said brought out the warmth in her eyes. She didn't do it for him. She did it for herself. A signal, perhaps, that mourning had shifted into something else. Forgiveness? No. But no longer rage. The apartment was quiet. Ilya emerged from his room dressed in a dark shirt and blazer, his expression unreadable. He looked like a young man caught in the awkward space between childhood and whatever came next. Ready? Anna asked. He nodded. She didn't ask if he was sure. She wasn't either. They took a taxi across the city. The cafe was small, discreet, tucked between a flower shop and an old bookstore. Anna had chosen it deliberately. Neutral ground, quiet, unpretentious. Victoria arrived a few minutes after them, Lev in tow, clutching a paper crane Ilya had folded for him the day before. The two women exchanged nods. Not quite smiles, but not tension either, just acknowledgement. Lev was shy at first, peeking out from behind Victoria's coat. Ilya bent down, meeting the boy's gaze on his level. He said, I'm your big brother. Lev blinked, considering, then stepped forward and held out the crane. Anna watched the exchange from her seat by the window. Something inside her shifted. She had spent weeks replaying everything, each lie, each omission, each beautiful, crumbling memory, but in this moment, none of it belonged to her anymore. The anger, the betrayal, it was no longer a fire, just ash. They shared tea and light conversation. No one brought up the will, or the letters, or the fact that one man had fractured them all. It wasn't the time. Instead, they spoke of school, of childhood stories, of small things that mattered in their own quiet way. Victoria excused herself to take a call, and for the first time, Anna was alone with Lev. He was watching Ilya with bright, observant eyes. Do you miss him? He asked softly. Anna looked at the child. The resemblance was uncanny. But the voice, so unfiltered, so honest. It belonged only to him. Yes, she said, but not the version I thought I knew. I miss clarity. Lev nodded solemnly, though she wasn't sure he understood. I have his watch, he said suddenly, pulling it from his coat pocket. Anna smiled faintly. He gave me one too. The symmetry stung less now. It just was. Later, as they stepped outside, the sky broke open. Rain began to fall, not heavy, just a soft mist that blurred the world into something almost gentle. Ilya turned to her. You okay? She considered. I think so, she said. It still hurts, but today, it didn't define me. They watched Victoria lift Lev into her arms. He waved at them from under her umbrella. I'm glad we came, Ilya added. Anna looped her arm through his, me too. They walked slowly, letting the rain soak into their clothes. Neither rushed to get home. For the first time in weeks, there was no urgency. No secrets pressing against the edges of silence. Just space. And in that space, possibility.